The central philosophical problem or paradox of free will centers around the thesis of determinism. So before we can state the problem clearly, we need to get clear on what determinism says and what determinism does not say. Before we can state determinism, a basic definition is going to be needed. This definition is the idea of the state of the world at a time. Let's say that the state of the world at a time is a complete description or list of every physical object that exists at that time and all of the properties of those objects at that time. So, for example, there is a state of the world at this moment. And that state of the world, let's call it S. S includes, as part of the list, that Professor Barker exists. S includes that you exist. S includes that picking up these scissors here, these scissors exist. It also notably includes the existence of each of the microphysical particles that make up the scissors and each of the little particles that make you up. S also includes each individual one of your neurons currently working in your brain. And indeed, the state of the world at this current moment also includes all of the properties of all of those objects just mentioned, and many more besides. So if some of your neurons are currently firing in a particular pattern, the state of the world at this time says those neurons are firing in that pattern in that person's brain or in my brain. It includes the locations of each of the particles making up these scissors, their mass. It includes the mass of the largest planet in the solar system, the smallest one. It includes all kinds of details that science has discovered and details that science has not yet discovered but could eventually discover. So as you can see, the idea of the state of the world at a time is a kind of abstraction, but it is a complete description of everything going on in the universe at a given moment. Determinism, we can now state, is the thesis that the state of the world at any given moment in time, so at some time t1, the state of the world at any given time t1, together with the laws of nature, necessitate or guarantee a single unique future state of the world at the next time. So let's break this down. What is this saying? Well, what determinism says, whether it's true or false, we can get to in a minute. Determinism tells us that if you take the state of the world at the present moment, which includes all of those details about which objects there are, what their locations are, what their mass is, all of their physical properties, all of their non-physical properties, and you add together the laws of nature governing the universe at that time. This would presumably include both the laws of general relativity, the laws of Newtonian mechanics when it comes to macrophysical objects, to the extent that we have a grasp of laws of the microphysical world, the laws of quantum physics at the basic level. If there are such things as laws of chemistry, those are also some of the laws of nature. Maybe eventually we will uncover neuroscientific laws. Those are also part of the laws of nature. Determinism says those two things, the state of the world at a given moment, together with the laws of nature, guarantee that there's going to be just one possible state of the world at the next moment. So necessarily, if you plug in some state of the world S1, and then you ask how many possible future states of the world could occur given the laws of nature and S1, the answer is always just one possible state of the world. One way to think about determinism then is it is a thesis about the relationship between the past and the future. And according to determinism, the past is related to the future as a deterministic function. If you plug in the same past and you plug in the same laws, there's only one possible output of the function, which is the next moment in time with all of those details, with maybe some slight changes as a result of dynamic processes unfolding. But if you go in and plug in the exact same state of the world again into that function, you'll always get out the same state of the world at the next moment. Another way to put it is this could be metaphorical or literal, depending on whether you're a theist. If determinism is true, then an omniscient being, if there were one, God, if God knew the state of the world at any given time, and God also knew the laws of nature, God would be able to predict exactly what the next state of the world at the next time would look like. So we can erase, for representing what determinism looks like pictorially, here's our time t1, here's our state of the world s1, and here are our laws of nature. If determinism is true, then there is just one way that the future could go. Let's add it like that. And that is going to be at the next moment, t2, and let's call that state of the world s2. Determinism says if the state of the world at t1 was s1, then necessarily there's only one possible way things could go at t2, which is s2. What determinism rules out is a situation like this, a branching futures situation, where corresponding to a single input, corresponding to a single past state of the world, there are two possible futures consistent with the laws of nature and the state of the world at that time. Determinism says that can't ever happen. There's only ever one possible road. Now, determinism, of course, doesn't say that it never looks to us as though the future branches. And indeed, if determinism is true, then one possibility is that our experience of freedom, or what feels like freedom, is an illusion that our consciousness generates for us. We have this experience of the world could go either of two possible ways. One way I choose to go to UCF, and the other way I choose not to. And I alone, am the only one who picks, the only one who selects which of these possible futures will be actual. And if you replay the tape of the world 100 times, sometimes I pick one way and sometimes I pick the other way. And you don't have to change the state of the world at any prior moment in order to have either of those two possible results. Determinism says you might experience that. It might feel to you from the inside as if that's what's going on when you make free decisions. But in reality, there's only one possible thing that you could do at the next moment. As a matter of fact, the only thing you could do, given that the state of the world was the way it was at your time of choosing, was choose UCF. It may have seemed to you as though you could have chosen otherwise, but according to determinism, given the same state of the world, you could not have chosen otherwise. It's really important to distinguish determinism from an even stronger thesis known as fatalism. According to fatalism, determinism is true, so fatalism entails determinism, but it adds another important detail. Determinism is true, and furthermore, there was only one possible first state of the world and only one possible set of laws of nature. That's what fatalism says. Fatalism, therefore, entails determinism, but determinism doesn't entail fatalism. So you can think of fatalism as determinism plus. Why is this important? Well, a lot of people, when they first encounter determinism, I think they mistakenly think that determinism by definition means that there can be no free will. The reason generally that they make that assumption is that they think that determinism is the view that nothing could have ever been different from the way it actually is. And it's easy to accidentally hear the thesis of determinism as the view that things could have only ever unfolded one possible way, if you don't distinguish fatalism from determinism. Here is, though, the difference. Determinism actually alone, let's call it mere determinism, doesn't say that things could have only gone one way in history. It doesn't say that there's no contingency in the world, is one way to put it. So, for example, consistent with determinism is that although you exist in the actual world, you didn't have to exist. You are not, as we put it when we discussed the existence of God, a necessary being. Nor are any of your decisions absolutely necessary. They are rather necessary only given that the world was a certain way at the immediately prior moment. And given that the laws of nature were what they were a moment ago. However, determinism is consistent with the following. If the world had been different in the past, in particular, if the first state of the world had been a little different, or for that matter, if the laws of nature had been a little different, then the next moment would have been also a little bit different, and the next moment would have been a bit different, and the next moment would have been a bit different. And perhaps there are other possible worlds that start differently, other ways things could have gone, other initial conditions at the Big Bang, other distributions of matter, such that if things had gone that way, you wouldn't have existed. There may well be other possibilities where the universe unfolds in a way that's not hospitable to human life at all. Now, that's not how things actually went. But the determinist says things could have gone that way, and the fact that they didn't is an accident. Had things gone that way, had the universe unfolded in a way that wasn't hospitable to life, there would have been no human beings, including your parents, and so including you. In that way, determinism is compatible with some amount of contingency in the world. It's not the case that given determinism, everything that in fact occurred necessarily occurred. Determinism only says that if you take precisely the same state of the world at any given time and add precisely the same laws, then there's only one possible outcome. Back to our metaphor of a function, you can have a function where if you add in a number to the function, deterministically you will always get out another number on the other side. Could there have been a different output of that function? Well, yes, all you need to do is add in a different number as an input. Now, you may not have actually added in another number as an input, but that's okay. It's still true of that function that had you added a different input, you would have gotten a different output. And that is structurally what determinism says about the relationship between the past and the future. Fatalism is stronger, though. Fatalism says determinism is true, so the way the past was at any given moment necessitates or guarantees a single unique state of the world at the next moment. And furthermore, there was only one possible input, only one possible first state of the world. So in our case, if the first state of the world was, let's call it S0, which eventually deterministically unfolded to, among other things, you existing, fatalism says, yeah, that's true, and also there was only one possible first state and only one possible set of laws. And as a result, not only is it the case that you exist given that your parents existed and given that the universe unfolded in a way that was hospitable to life, but furthermore, that is the only way the universe could possibly have gone. And so it is true on fatalism that you had to exist. You're not a contingent being if fatalism is true. For that reason, none of your decisions are contingent beings either. Anything you decided of necessity. You had to. Determinism doesn't quite have that implication. Determinism only says your decisions were made a certain way and your behavior went a certain way and had to go that way given that the past unfolded as it did. But if the past had unfolded differently, then perhaps there would have been a different scenario where you exist, have slightly different preferences, and choose, say, to go to USF instead of UCF. All of that would have unfolded in a deterministic way, but nevertheless, you, in that sense, could have done something other than what you actually do. I'm stressing this both because I want you to see that determinism is not fatalism, because I think that's often a confusion that people have when they're first introduced to the problem of free will. And second, because as we'll discuss a little later, One of the most popular solutions to the problem of free will is known as compatibilism. And compatibilists say that even if determinism is true, we can still have free will. To people who first encountered the problem of free will, if they haven't sufficiently distinguished determinism and fatalism, that can sound like a contradiction in terms. Compatibilism may well be false. I mean, Kant famously called it a wretched subterfuge. He thought it was a trick. But if it's false, it's not false by definition. They're not contradicting themselves. The view that fatalism and free will are compatible is awfully close to a contradiction. The view that determinism and free will are compatible, though, if false, needs to be proven false by way of argument, not just appeal to definition.